Hello everyone, and welcome to a bit of a special episode of Redcon. My name is Ross, and for this video I will be going over ballistics in Redcon, which pretty much means that we will, well, in a very brief manner, go over every single weapon in Redcon. Their strengths, weaknesses, how to best utilize them, whatnot. Just to maybe help some newer players that got inspired to play the game because of my videos. So we're gonna jump straight into it. So first up is the Basilisk. This is the first weapon you're introduced to in Redcon. It is a fast-firing and relatively weak gun, but can do great in numbers. The strength of the Basilisk is how cheap the gun is on energy and ammo, as you can see here, and of course money in normal/hard mode. This makes it a great tool for suppression, as one Basilisk can deal more damage than 2 crew members can repair. It can also fire flashbangs, which stun for 9 seconds, or double shot, which trades accuracy for firing 2 shots at once. The weaknesses lie in how flimsy it is. Being the weakest gun in the game, it can be one-shot by something like the Typhon, and being counted as a low-caliber gun, it is very susceptible to laser defenses. Alright, moving on, next up is the Hydra, which is basically a triple-barreled basilisk, so I won't go on too much about it. Oh god. It deals slightly less damage than the basilisk, but of course fires 3 rounds instead of 1. It has the same weaknesses too, but has the ability to fire a 9-round burst or 12 rounds fully upgraded. Moving very quickly on, we're on to the mortars. Beginning with the Talos mortar. Being the second weapon you use, this thing carries a way bigger punch than the basilisk, but still has a quick reload. It consumes a good bunch of ammo, equivalent to 2 basilisk, and doesn't take that much power. It can fire both flashbangs that stun for 12 seconds or shredder bombs that are anti-personnel fragmentation bombs that deal little damage to equipment. Its upsides are the aforementioned quick reload and increased damage to enemy forts. Its downside is the ammo cost and only having good accuracy against surface level equipment. To briefly explain, mortars are only good for stuff like this, my base here as an example. It'll only be good against the Alistairs. It will struggle to hit anything we're in, unless of course these are destroyed. The most effective defense against mortars is flak, but autocannons can work too, but don't rely on it. Next up is the Tartarus. This is the second mortar you unlock, only improving on the previous variant. Bless me, excuse me. It is very late in the night when I'm recording this. It takes just as much ammo and only 1 more power, but deals double the damage and even stuns any survivors for a short second on impact. The Tartarus can of course fire Shredder, like the one before it, dealing even more personal damage, and even incendiary bombs, setting the zone on fire. Moving on, we will take all the missiles in one go. Next thing you'll unlock is the Python missile pod. This is the first set of missiles you get, and similar to the mortars, they take a lot of ammo, but very little power. They deal quite a bunch of damage to both personnel and equipment, and are able to completely ignore kinetic shields. Their strength lies in having perfect accuracy, they literally cannot miss no matter what, and the damage they deal. Their weakness is how slow they are, making them very vulnerable to defensive turrets. The most effective defense against missiles is autocannons, but lasers are also okay if you have a few of them. And of course how expensive on ammo they are. Keeping up the pace, we have the Taipan missile, a sibling to the Python, but instead of firing a HE rocket, fires a neurotoxin payload, making any zone lethal for 30 seconds. The final variant is the most straightforward one. The Viper missile. It's an incendiary variant that sets any zone on fire. Simple as. Onto the big guns. Next up is the Alistair, the first big gun you unlock. It is a very good do-it-all cannon, having decent health, damage, fire rate, and payloads. The Alistair is able to fire flashbangs that stun for 20 seconds, incendiary that sets the zone on fire, or neurotoxin, which spreads gas in the targeted zone for 30 seconds. Now, there might be a bit of bias here, but there's honestly nothing too bad about this gun. It's good for most jobs you give it, be it anti-personnel, sniping, area denial, or just general damage. The best way to deal with Alistairs is flak, but autocannons can work with a few lucky hits, but don't rely on that whatsoever. Next up, one of my favorites, the Archon, a high-velocity sniper cannon with insane accuracy. It is powerful enough to strike into the deepest parts of enemy forts with over 60% accuracy most of the time. With balanced stats, the only thing holding the Archon back is a slightly longer reload, just barely slower than an Alistair. It can fire flashbangs, stun for 28 seconds, and the best defense against them is flak. And due to how fast these shells are, they most of the time won't trigger lasers or autocannons. The best defense against Archons, therefore, is honestly to not have them there in the first place. And what I mean by that is try to always prioritize Archons no matter what when engaging an enemy. Next up, it's upwards, here we are. Next up is the Typhon, the second big gun and the one you'll see in one of the tutorial missions. Now, the Typhon is a terrifying gun to face. With a huge health pool equal to 2 Alistairs or almost 3 fully upgraded, it can really take a beating. And being such a colossal gun, it can also give a beating too, being able to one-shot guns like the Hydra and Basilisk as I mentioned before. The shells are also so powerful they cause damage to both personnel and equipment in the neighboring zones. It can fire incendiary, that's setting any zone on fire, and toxic, making any room gas for 42 seconds. Black is the best defense against them, but due to how the Typhon shells arc, they can sometimes slip under enemy defenses. And I won't go into a mission to show this, but I will briefly explain. Something like my Alistairs here usually plummet down at roughly 45 degrees angle, maybe a little bit steeper, probably. I'm not particularly great with angles. Archons really like dive in. Archons fly in at like 80-degree angles. They fly in super sharp. Typhons like this, in certain cases, can fly upwards. They, when fired, instead of flying downwards, they can sometimes fly upwards towards enemy structures, especially if you're firing at something very low down. And because of the general layout of most bases you encounter, but yeah, as I mentioned, that makes you able to most of the time slip underneath the enemy defenses because they don't have the gun depression. And on to the last big weapon. The Omega Capital Destroyer is the largest piece you'll find in Redcon, being the gun you see in the main menu when you start up the game. It has an enormous health pool equal to 8 level 1 Alistairs, given that it's a level 1 Omega, and insane damage to back it up. A fully upgraded Omega can destroy every single utility room in the game in one shot. And most guns too. God, excuse me. Due to the insane size, like the Typhon, it stunts soldiers in neighboring zones and deals splash damage to both personnel and equipment. It can fire both incendiary shells that sets target zone and neighboring zones ablaze, or it can fire toxic, which also spreads to neighboring zones and lasts for 60 seconds. The best defense against the Omega is flak, but due to how powerful these shells can be, a shield works too, since it blocks the shells outright. Now onto the energy weapons, beginning with the Orion, a small EMP weapon that consumes very little ammo, but a decent bit of power. It cannot deal damage to enemy equipment, but deals a surprising amount of damage to soldiers. It can of course shut down various things, negating 3 power for 25 seconds. The upside is of course how you can deny the enemy certain things, like turning off cannons, medbays, whatnot, but also how it cannot be shot down by any defense. So your best defense against EMPs is a shield or a lot of excess power. One important note is how the enemy will always try to take out your EMP first, and when you encounter an enemy with only EMPs, put one down of your own, and it'll take a good bunch of the punishment. Moving swiftly on, we have the Hyperion. Simply a bigger EMP with the same strengths and weaknesses, except it negates 6 power for 25 seconds. The last two energy weapons are lasers, beginning with the Solaris. It's a small laser that doesn't deal all that much damage, but ignores all kinds of defenses, both turrets and shields, with 100% accuracy. Like all other energy weapons, it takes very little ammo but a chunk of power, and depending on the level has between a 25 and a 33% chance to set the target zone on fire. Yeah, 29 here, and then with the last level, 33. The final energy weapon is the Sirius Scorcher Beam, which yet again is just a bigger laser, but it deals way more damage, roughly 3 times the damage of the Solaris. It can absolutely melt rooms and personnel alike, with a 75% chance to set a target on fire, or 85% with the best level. The final 3 weapons we have are ICBMs, or Intercontinental Ballistic Missiles. Very lethal, but also very expensive weapons. All of them, like the smaller missiles, ignore shields, but autocannons make short work of all of them. The first on the list is the Charon Impact Landing ICBM, which instead of carrying an explosive payload, sends away 2 soldiers in the shuttle to invade the enemy base. While not dealing much damage, the impact stuns anyone in the target zone and its neighboring zones for roughly 15 seconds, giving your men plenty of time to kill anyone nearby. Next up is the NYX Neurotoxin ICBM, which, kinda obvious by the name, spreads toxin throughout the enemy base, even zones nearby the target area, for between 36 and 60 seconds. The final weapon in the game is the Nemesis Tactical Nuke ICBM, which, yet again, is pretty obvious what it does. On impact, it will explode, dealing 300 damage to the target, and dealing 100 damage to all adjacent zones. And on top of all that, sets all zones in that area on fire. And that just about does it. That's every weapon in the game covered. I know this was a rather short video and a lot of this was compact, but I feel like I went over everything that most people need to know. If you all want to, I can also go over all the utilities and my opinion on them. But other than that, that does it. Hope this guide was of help, and I will see you all next week. Have a great weekend and bye bye.